Welcome, everyone. Let's give it up for engineering tomorrow's infrastructure. Yes, we have an absolutely delightful panel, and we are looking forward to really digging into the details, talking more about community. As I stated in the last session, if we're going to solve for smarter cities, we need smart people. But that means those smart people sit in smart sectors. Smart sectors include government, public sector, private sector, community sectors. We solve better. And so this Engineering Tomorrow's Infrastructure statement will give us a little bit more insight to that. I'd like to hand off the mic to our moderator. This is Stephen Reed. It's Sam Johnson. Thank you, Sam. Sam Johnson, Chief Executive Officer of Civint, and he will be moderating today. Walk away with something great. Thanks so much.
Ebony, thank you so much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Well, we got 30 minutes until good afternoon. So, good morning. Oh, y'all can do better than that. Good morning.
Good morning.
There we go. So, I'm from Columbia, South Carolina. We have another Southerner, and actually, all of us have Southern roots here. So, when I grew up in a Baptist church, I'm used to call and response. So when I say good morning, I want to make sure y'all have some energy. As Ebony mentioned, we're going to be talking infrastructure, and she made the gaffe of calling me Stephen Reed. I can't tell y'all how many conferences I'm at, and they're like, Mayor! And I'm like, nah, he's over there. Now, I take all the accolades and all the credit now. Oh. We're gonna dive right in. I'm just gonna have them share in 2 seconds name, title, and just one quick thing, kind of background, and then we're gonna dive straight into the conversation. Mayor Reed, I'm gonna start with you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Stephen Reed. I'm the mayor of Montgomery, Alabama, in my second term. Thankfully, still learning and listening to come up with better ideas to bring back to our community. But I'm also the president of the African American Mayors Association, and been proud to lead that since last April. We'll be handing that off here in just a few weeks to our incoming president, Van Johnson, mayor of Savannah. So it's been great to work with Smart City Expo USA over the last few years, and Artie Tannen and her team, but also all these great individuals here, what they do both in their individual and collective capacity. So happy to be here with you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Victoria Johnson. I'm a vice president with HDR Engineering. We are a planning, engineering, design firm working across all aspects of infrastructure, so roads, bridges, airports, water. And so really excited to be here today. We do tons of work with Mayor Reed in Montgomery, as well as supporting the African American Mayors Association, and also some work here in New York City, which I know we'll talk a bit about. So glad to be a part of the conversation.
Hi, everybody. Rory Linehan. I'm the Director of Infrastructure Policy Advancement at Bentley Systems. At Bentley Systems, we're advancing the world's infrastructure, providing technology, mainly to design, build, but also to own and operate infrastructure assets. We work exclusively in infrastructure. You may detect an accent here. I am from the South originally, but you just have to keep going south on the map, originally from Australia, and delighted to be here today, so thank you.
Well, we're going to dive straight in. Mayor Reed, I'm going to come to you first. As I mentioned, guys, I serve as CEO of a company called Civint. We spend a lot of time focusing on all things cities. And so I happen to know that Mayor Reed, you are not only the president of African American Mayors Association this year, you're a trustee for U.S. Conference of Mayors, you're intimately involved in a lot of our municipal organizations. And so I'm saying all this to say that I know that when you're providing your insight, I want to set the table for everyone that he's providing insight not just from the mayor of Montgomery and what he's seeing from that lens of Montgomery, but also across this country. I want to talk to you first about something that you're doing in Montgomery. I want to talk to you about $36.6 million infrastructure project that you've got in West Montgomery. I want to hear from you on how that is reshaping Montgomery and your vision for that.
Sure. I think for a lot of us as mayors across the country, the last 4 years were very beneficial because we had record-setting investments in our cities, in particular in infrastructure, whether it was fiber, whether it was broadband access, or whether it was water and sewer. Certainly in Montgomery, we benefited from a major Reconnecting Communities grant and $36 million to connect a part of Montgomery which sits along the Selma to Montgomery Voting Rights Trail. This is a historic trail that Dr. King and John Lewis, Mrs. Coretta Scott King, and others marched on the 54-mile track from Selma to Montgomery for everyone to have the right to vote. However, what happened in the 60s after that was disinvestment. And it was direct, it was intentional to divide this community, which really participated and helped shepherd in not only the Voting Rights Act, but so many other impacts that came out of that. But we did not have the amount of investment, we did not have the amount of maintenance and upkeep in the infrastructure in the decades since. So with this grant, it really put us on the map with other private sector partners as well as philanthropic partners, because we got the stamp of readiness from our federal government and Secretary Buttigieg at the time. And so what this will allow us to do is to turn brownfields into EV stations, to narrow the highways from 6 lanes down to about 3, adding bike lanes along with that. But also there's a workforce training component with our K-12 high schools as well as our 2-year colleges to assist them in the microgrid and what is coming as it relates to the future of infrastructure in cities and how they can participate in that from a workforce perspective. The other aspect of it for us is EV chargers, making sure that EVs are as accessible in low to moderate income neighborhoods as they are in affluent neighborhoods. That's part of making sure that communities and neighborhoods like this don't fall further behind over the next 10 to 20 years. So this investment in our community, this investment in our people really reflects what we saw from the previous administration around the country in these Reconnected Communities grants, but also what we saw from private sector partners that wanted to come and assist us in these endeavors, as well as the philanthropic community to kind of help those who live in the communities understand where the opportunities are and how we in government can really connect and kind of make sure some of those residents aren't left out of the new opportunities that are coming because of their age or because of their income status. And for us, it's been a great accomplishment, and it's one that we're really building and we're learning as we go. But we're certainly happy to have the investment, but more importantly, to have the partnership, I would think, with the public and philanthropic sector.
Mayor, I'll tell you, that is perfect and a perfect lead off for this session. Victoria, I feel like I've got to come to you after that. One of the things, as we were in the green room or in the speaker room just now, we were talking about how we can leverage infrastructure to create that platform, right, for all citizens to be able to have that, have the opportunities. Just put the period there, right? I would love, one, for you to share your expertise there. Certainly, I would love for you to also speak about how HDR is helping to lead and helping mayors who have that vision that Mayor Reed just talked about. But I'd love for you to just kind of jump in from right there.
Absolutely, thank you, Sam. So the work that we do to essentially center people in infrastructure is critical to helping cities like Montgomery achieve broader outcomes through infrastructure. So often we get so caught up in the hard infrastructure of roads, bridges, and airports and the technical legalese that we certainly want to continue to support and center, but we forget that we're serving people. And so as Mayor Reed indicated, how can we create job opportunities through these capital plans and projects? How can we create more opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses in these neighborhoods to actually participate in the delivery of these projects? How can we also help raise up a younger, more diverse workforce? So there's so many opportunities. We do tons of work in this space. I actually lead an equity practice for HDR, so in conjunction with our design, engineering, and delivery project delivery supports. We also have equity supports with regards to, for example, right here in New York, we've been working with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey for well over 5 years on the airport redevelopment of JFK, LaGuardia, and EWR. This is over $25 billion in these 3 airports, and we would be remiss, right, if we didn't make sure that the residents of Queens, who are certainly predominantly Black and brown, benefit from those investments. So very proud at LaGuardia alone. We were able to achieve about $850 million with Black-owned businesses, Black and brown businesses, right in the heart of Queens. And also, we were able to create over 1,500 jobs. So as Mayor Reed mentioned, wonderful workforce development opportunities. So as we're working on these projects, how are we engaging members of the community, veterans, second chance citizens? How are we engaging young people to essentially introduce them to careers and infrastructure? So I can go on and on, but I know we want to hear from Rory. There's so many best practices in terms of how we infuse these types of supports and methodologies in the delivery of capital planning and infrastructure. So look forward to talking more about it.
Rory, as Victoria mentioned, I want to come to you next and add you to this conversation. And certainly we've been talking about things from a U.S. lens. And you mentioned your southern accent. I'd love for you to add that southern accent to this conversation and talk through globally what we're seeing on infrastructure, the challenges that we need to address there, but certainly how technology can aid us in addressing those challenges, and certainly those that benefit can also be applied to the U.S. as well.
Thanks, Sam, and such an honor to be on the panel with Mayor Reed and Victoria, and thank you to everybody in the room. I guess I'll start off with a question. Who saw the American Society of Civil Engineers report card released last week? Everybody see that? Yep. Anybody know what grade U.S. infrastructure got overall? Yell it out. C, that's right. And round of applause, it was our best grade ever. So, we're on the improve. And I make a little bit of a joke around that because, obviously U.S. infrastructure is not where we want it to be today, right? You can see it when you're on our roads. You can see it at some airports, but thankfully here in New York, we're seeing the great work of some redevelopment around there. But U.S. infrastructure isn't out by itself. Globally, the UN estimates there's a $5 trillion deficit in between our needs and what we're investing each year. And that's both in the developing world, where we need access to education, electricity. Half of Africa doesn't have access to electricity, from basic services we rely on. But here in the US and in the developed world, our infrastructure is creaking. It is outdated. We had vision, we had foresight through President Roosevelt and the New Deal, or President Eisenhower and the interstate network. That infrastructure that was built is largely the infrastructure we use here today. So thanks to the leadership of, on both sides of the aisle with IIJA, we saw a record amount of money invested in infrastructure, $1.2 billion. Great to see, Mayor Reed, how that's being invested into your community. And I think that's the kind of energy that we need to keep going. That is what we need. And technology can certainly be an enabler in all of that. So looking forward to diving in a little bit more, but obviously we've heard a lot about AI today and yesterday. We're hearing things about IoT sensors. We're hearing things like digital twins, which is what Bentley is very well known for, and all of these things can be terrific. But they aren't the panacea. They aren't the solution to everybody's sort of infrastructure challenge. Getting back to our roots, the why, exactly what Mayor Reed and Victoria, you've talked about, the communities that rely on this infrastructure, how they're accessing, my phone, speaking of infrastructure, how they're accessing that infrastructure, and then once we provide the tools for our communities to be able to thrive, they can then contribute back and provide more economic growth, and it's a self-serving circle. And so technology can certainly play a part in bridging the capacity gap that we have in helping to deliver more effective, more climate-resilient infrastructure, but it's just a piece of the bigger puzzle.
So, and I apologize, I neglected to give the ground rules to my panelists in both the green room as well as on the stage here. If someone says something and it dovetails to what you want to comment or mention or add on to, please feel free. Mayor Reed, you said something just a second ago that I want to circle back to. You mentioned your work around this $36 million project, around this past administration with Secretary Pete. I want you to answer this question from both the mayor of Montgomery, but also the mayors around the country, right? When you are looking for a federal partner, right, what are you looking for to address some of these challenges, especially from an infrastructure lens? And as we talk about some of this current administration's focuses, how do you make sure that lines up with what you have to deliver as the mayor of Montgomery?
Sure. I think that whether the African American Mayors Association or the United States Conference of Mayors, of which I would encourage all of you to join us in both those organizations, because your feedback is needed as those in the private sector to kind of guide us on best practices. We live in a day and age where people have short attention spans, but they are long on opinions. So, they don't really see what's happening. They don't really pay attention. So we have to try to feed the beast, if you will, that is the consumer or our residents, day in and day out. So when you're working with the federal government, of course, it's a big bureaucracy. It takes a lot to get things done. But I think it starts off with a level of trust that you have to have, as well as a level of shared vision, and that is improving our cities. When you understand where the population is in this country, I think over about 86% of people live in cities, well over 90% of the GDP is from cities. You understand that you have to invest in those cities. And that's not the exclusion of rural America, but rural America also has small towns that need these investments as well. So working with the past administration, a lot of it came down to being proactive and seeking out partnerships with the administration, in particular DOT, but also labor and all the other branches of government, and then making sure that from our standpoint, we were able to share the value proposition of working with not only the city of Montgomery in my case, but cities around the country, in particular those cities in the heartland. When we think about the population that does not live on the coast, often those cities are left out, and often the investments don't flow there, maybe like they do in the JFK and those airports, or the railways you have on the Acela corridor. But you still need that in between, and the heartland is a very important place that I think the previous administration, the Biden administration, really understood. So identifying, the vision, making sure that, you can share the value proposition of why investment was needed, being proactive in communication with the staff, with the intergovernmental relations team, but also finalizing that with the trust and being able to tell your federal partners what we don't have. Here's, maybe some things we've got to work on. Here's what we do have, and if that means taking something that I may have as priority number 6 and moving that to number 2 because I don't have really what I need at number 2 for the appropriation for the partnership, then being honest and candid, and also that coming from the federal government as well. And even under this administration, we're looking forward to working with the new transportation secretary, because there's still a lot of unfulfilled priorities out there, and there are a lot of projects, and the money is still floating out there in the ether right now, that we've got to figure out, okay, how is that going to ultimately impact cities and communities across the board? And I think that's what we as mayors are talking about and trying to figure out, who's getting progress, what language are they using to get that progress, and what projects are they highlighting that may be different with this administration that may not have been the same under the previous administration?
Mayor, thank you for that. And I know through the U.S. Conference of Mayors, you've been involved and engaged with the P3 task force. I know in our speaker room, Rory, you and I were talking about that grade, that C, right? The need that also showcases. And I guess my question would be, for this current administration, if you're looking for delivery, how can the private sector help How can we lean on the private sector from a capacity perspective? And Victoria, I'm gonna come to you after this to also kind of give some insight here on kind of how HDR is able to help in some of the expertise that you guys bring to the table as well.
Great, thanks, Sam. And look, if I go back to the state of US infrastructure, if you look at the same report card, it will tell you that there's about a $300 billion annual deficit in the US each year if we keep the same levels of funding that we have under IIJA, right? And that's up for reauthorization next year, still a big if, and still a big gap between needs and demand. One thing we haven't yet seen in the US is the takeoff of public-private partnerships as we have in other countries, but we have seen some really good examples of it happening in and around New York lately, and the US may be leaning into it more than what other jurisdictions have. And Tori, you just have a look at some of the projects you've been working on, from JFK Terminal 1 to LaGuardia. These are all P3s. If you've taken the subway this week, you'll have seen the accessibility stickers. That was a P3. So it's coming and it's happening, and the private sector is being engaged as a steward to help finance, fund, and operate infrastructure in the US. And I think we need more of that, but we need more of that focused again on our communities and the outcomes, not the dollar amount that we're investing. And if I think of kind of the equity piece, Mayor, that you brought up about rural communities, we have a really good example in a tiny town called Perry, Iowa. Perry, Iowa, I think there's like 8,000 people that live there, and they now have a digital twin at a citywide level. It's remarkable. How they were able to do that was really happenstance, but they've turned it into something amazing. So being a growing city, they needed to respond to the ADA and make sure that their footpaths and sidewalks were compliant under the ADA. And so they enlisted Bentley's help in order to create a system to be able to map that across the city. Then they worked out, no, you know what, why don't we map all of the city's infrastructure and assets? And as a result of that, they've attracted 75% more interest in their capital investment program than they had previously, because investors can see the historical data of the assets throughout the city. It is phenomenal, and that's happening at a tiny city using a little bit of innovation and some will. So I think we've got a number of great examples. There's also an example right here in New York State that I want to touch on. So we talking about the climate and resilience challenges that we face, the city of Ithaca, on the border up with Canada there, they are looking to electrify all of their building stock by 2030. It's remarkable. We haven't seen that sort of ambition in any other US municipality yet, but they've lent on technology to be able to hopefully achieve that. So they've, with the aid of Cornell, using the tools that they have in their jurisdiction, they've created a citywide digital twin. What's really cool about this digital twin is it's focused on low-income neighborhoods. So they want to electrify 6,500 buildings. That's public, private, and commercial. How do you do that when a lot of those are private-owned and the people that own those buildings don't have the means to be able to do it? They've mapped all of the assets, and then they've created a calculator for each building in the city to say roughly how much it will cost them to be able to electrify their building stock. But beyond that, they're using AI to power those insights and connect them with federal, state, municipal grants that can help particularly low-income neighborhoods electrify their buildings. And that's where I think the rubber really hits the road, when we're focused on the outcomes for our communities.
Victoria, I'll come to you. I would love to hear how HDR is helping cities kind of future-proof or future-ready, if you will, in the areas of aviation, water, transportation, infrastructure overall.
Absolutely, thank you, Sam. And so as we look at the variety of challenges that cities face as it relates to aging infrastructure, increased natural disasters, we saw unfortunately what just happened in Los Angeles, which I'll talk about shortly, the unfortunate incident in Baltimore at the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Cities are facing some very serious challenges. And so with that, we can't deliver the same old infrastructure and the same old approaches that we've deployed before. And so we are approaching it through a variety of ways, which Rory touched on a bit, is with the variety of challenges that our clients have, how are we helping them meet some of those challenges through technology? So I want to highlight just a couple technology, I should mention, as well as innovation. So in Los Angeles, if anyone's flown through LAX, Los Angeles is home. LAX is a fantastic airport, but it is in dire need, of a people mover. And so we have been working with LAX to essentially develop an automated people mover train system. So if you've flown through Miami, they have a fantastic people mover. And so within that, it's projected, I believe, to, once completed, move about 87 million passengers. So think about the magnitude to really alleviate that congestion, and through that we're implementing, pardon me, using some BIM modeling, 3D modeling, and a few different approaches, to really help with the life cycle process that happens in projects. So the planning piece, the design piece, construction, to really make sure that you have the data needed so those processes can happen in an automated approach. So that's underway. Also want to mention, take us up to Washington and Seattle, we're also working on the Diablo Dam. And so oftentimes dams, levees, bridges, essentially they have cracks. They have, different maintenance needs, if you will, and preventative maintenance is best. And so as opposed to some of the older manual approaches of putting staff on ropes and kind of jumping down in there, we've been able to leverage the use of drones to essentially provide a complete assessment and inventory of what's going on in the dam, what are the different cracks and needs that need to happen. So essentially through the use of drones, we've been able to essentially use it to provide inspection. And so with that, as Rory shared, we take that data back in-house, and we have a wealth of data, if you will, that multidisciplinary project teams can leverage to support repairs as well as support operations and maintenance. And then I'll close by saying, as Mayor Reed mentioned, mayors all over the country are tackling these issues, and we had the opportunity to visit Los Angeles in February. The AMA set together a delegation of mayors all over the country to meet with Mayor Bass and her team to survey the damage of the wildfires in Pacific Palisades and Altadena, California. Both communities of families and children and seniors, but the income levels are significantly different. So the delivery in terms of rebuild also has to be equitable. And so as we think about that, we were also able to meet with the local fire captain there, who was able to walk us through how they were able to use drone technology during the fires to essentially help with notification in terms of evacuation methods, also with regards to some of the hazmat removal that's going on as we speak. And so really trying to be more innovative in terms of how we deliver these projects, but also center people in terms of looking at how we can rebuild in ways that are more equitable and community-centered.
Thank you, Victoria. Mayor Reed, I'm gonna come to you. Raise your hand in the audience if you've ever been on a city's website. Okay.
Wow. Only here would you get that.
Yeah.
You would not get that anywhere else. I've been in enough of these.
I jokingly call city websites the black abyss. My prayers to each and every one of you. Mayor Reed, you are working to change that.
Yeah.
And so the city of Montgomery has launched an open data portal. I would love to hear how you guys are leveraging technology for that. And then honestly, even beyond that, you and I have talked before on how for a southern city, you have to work to change the dynamics as it relates to technology and what is even just the ethos of a southern city. And you think about out west with Silicon Valley, and certainly you think about New York and all the fiber and broadband. But I'd love to hear how you're changing that dynamic in Montgomery.
Well, essentially, you bring that up, and I'll start with the second half of that question, Sam. We just took a group of mayors from the African American Mayors Association to meet with A16Z in Silicon Valley to talk about not only some of their portfolio companies, but how government and those companies can really leverage our partnerships to bring about the production that our residents are looking for. Obviously, from their side, they're trying to see, are they, pointing in the right direction from a profit standpoint. But it works, for each of us to be able to sit down with venture capitalists, to be able to sit down with those founders of companies that are, selling to cities and really selling services and products that we want to use and we want to implement to see if, there's that alignment that's needed. Because we're all looking to make our cities, more productive. We're all trying to get that efficiency in our operations. And as mayors, the job now is a lot different. I hear that from former mayors. I hear that from mayors who've been in office for over a decade. It's just a lot different in terms of what the expectations are and the level of organization that you're asked to lead. So technology has to be centered in everything that we do, whether it's 911, whether it's public safety, whether it's finance, whether it's our landfill, or whether it's our sanitation. We're always looking for a way to find a productive advantage, if you will, for our government services so that we can share the cost savings with the city, but also share the performance and what that means if our sanitation crews knows exactly which houses they need to pick up trash from and which ones they don't. What streets have a pickup rate of 80, 90% versus those that are about 40, 50%. How does that allow us to pick up more trash quicker and help, really keep our streets a lot cleaner? So we're leveraging technology every way we can. In the open data portal, our belief is that transparency builds trust. And so if you go to our site, and we've had a lot of publicity around this, it's really come about through a partnership with the Bloomberg philanthropies as well as the Harvard City Data Project. So Bloomberg and Harvard kind of partnered together, and they brought in several cities so that we could understand how to use data to make informed decisions. And we found that the Open Data Project really had gone by the wayside until recently, and we were missing a lot of information. We were missing a lot of data that was out there to inform us in terms of staffing, to inform us as it relates to priority, and to inform us about how we can invest the taxpayers' dollars at a much more efficient level. And that's something that with our open data portal, we've modeled after other cities. And I think, again, for me, being on the board of directors for the United States Conference of Mayors, serving as a president of the African American Mayors Association, you get a chance to see cities from coast to coast. You get a chance to see what those best practices are. And what I've seen is that the open data portals do allow for the public, they allow for the private sector to take a look at where you're investing your dollars, where your priorities are, what's working, and really it's allowed us to really have more productive conversations with vendors to say, look, we've seen kind of what you all are doing here. We think you can save you money, and we think we can save time if you all will take a look at what we're doing in this capacity. So it's not only for the public and for the residents to be able to separate fact from fiction, because believe it or not everything you read on Facebook is true. Not everything that you see on social media is accurate. But our residents take it as that. So we want to be able to point out to them through our city council, through our neighborhood associations, and then sometimes just through direct contact, what we're doing from an infrastructure perspective, where that road paving project is in terms of its lifespan, where is that street initiative that we promised as it relates to street lights, where is that coming? We want to be able to point those things out, and we want those people to then be able to share that on Nextdoor, which can be interesting. If you care about your ego, don't ever be a public official and go on Nextdoor. You'll find out real fast what your community thinks about you. But every now and then you get a chance to drop some facts in there that maybe 3 people will read and share versus the 30 that are going to share, the negative piece that's out there. But that comes with the territory. And for us, I think having the open data portal is a lot like opening up our blinds and saying, take a look inside what government is doing and how we're trying to serve you in an efficient and effective manner.
Sam, if you don't mind, I want to pick up on a point Mayor Reed made around the open data portal. In the intersection, if you will, of equity and infrastructure. We're also leveraging technology and equity, and what we mean by that is, for example, we're working currently with the New York City Department of Environmental Protection on their long-term control plan and the use attainability analysis. And so it's looking at 12 water bodies right here in New York City, starting with the Harlem River, which we also know is a thriving community, but also certainly has some variance in terms of income levels. And so as we essentially look at the water quality in the Harlem River, and essentially, is it safe enough for public recreation? Also within that, what we call GIS mapping approach, where we're collecting data sets, also looking at demographic data in terms of age, race, income levels, and other people-centered social components to ensure that as we develop solutions for that, and working currently with the New York DEC and the EPA essentially on that outcome, ensuring that in addition to, of course, looking at the water quality, how are we also looking at how residents and ratepayers adjacent to the Harlem River engage and how essentially they're impacted? And so want to just again talk through or just reference how through equity, infrastructure, and technology, we're also grounding essentially the environmental, the social, and the economic impact of, again, these investments in a city.
That's perfect. I mean, that's really the intersection of technology, equity, I mean, everything we just talked about. So that's actually a perfect example. Let me ask this question. Well, before I ask the question, Mayor, as a former public servant, I can appreciate you going on next door and setting the facts straight a little bit. So I appreciate your service there. How many of you on your cell phones, how many of you get like breaking news alerts, you know, that sort of thing? How many of y'all ever had your phone just buzz? Okay. Well, you're getting ready to get a live breaking news alert. So, Rory, I'm gonna come to you, and you're gonna ding on everybody's phone real quick.
Okay. All right. Well, as my phone fell off my leg before, I got an alert. And so we have, and thank you for the opportunity, we have an arm of our company called Blinksy. Blinksy use AI and dash cams. Maybe there's an alert coming through here too. Blinksy use AI and dash cams in order to map the maintenance of roads right across the country, the maintenance needs. And so I'm talking anything from signposts to guardrails to pavement. Blinksy buys the dash cam footage, puts it through AI, and then is able to tell departments of transportation, municipal governments, kind of the state of their road almost in real time. And so the announcement today at Google Next, about 20 minutes ago, was that Blinksy and Google are partnering together, and together they are integrating Blinksy into Google Maps. And so you'll be able to get a 360-degree view of the state of the road, and you'll be able to compare it with historical states. So you'll be able to see what it looked like today and maybe what it looked like a little while in the past. So that's the announcement today. We're really proud of it, and thank you for the opportunity.
No, of course. Guys, we are almost at time. I'm going to wrap up. The title of our panel here is Engineering Tomorrow's Infrastructure. I'm going to let each of our panelists just very quickly and briefly share their thoughts on engineering tomorrow's infrastructure and what it means, whether it's Montgomery, whether it's on behalf of the nation's mayor. Love for you just to share in rapid fire what your vision is for infrastructure, whether it's Victoria on equity. Love for you to also share and go there. But I see the Southern gentleman letting Victoria go first here. But in this rapid fire, y'all, love for y'all just to share very quickly so we get out of here.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Reed. So as we think about how we engineer tomorrow's infrastructure and essentially build the infrastructure of the future, particularly on the heels of the COVID-19 pandemic and the hybrid environment that we find ourselves in, the continued development of technology and tools to help us both at home and at work, just encouraging us to continue to lean into the data, because the data essentially tells the story. And so leaving us essentially with an approach that is three-pronged: environment, economic impact, and social impact. And again, as we continue to steward our infrastructure, whether it's a road, a bridge, an airport, our water quality, understanding that we're serving real people, real communities that have real challenges. And so the solutions of tomorrow have to be comprehensive, they have to be multidisciplined, and essentially they have to provide broad outcomes, essentially, to ensure that we're delivering on the promises that we're making, and also to ensure that we're able to weather the storms, essentially, that are coming.
Well, I think that infrastructure for tomorrow means certainly including people, and not thinking of them just from the project and from the financial perspective, but what feedback are we getting from the communities that we want to invest in. And if there's one thing I would encourage all of you to do, is to make sure that as you think of your services, your projects, you think about how they impact the communities in which you want to invest. That's what we have to think about as CEOs of our cities, and that's what we want to make sure we are thinking about in terms of who we partner with. Second, I think we have to think about sustainability. How does that look in 2030? How does it look in 2035 and beyond? When we consider where many of our systems are right now, being 50 plus years old, what will that look like, and how do we fund it if we are indeed coming into a different political environment around refocusing and reinvesting in our cities over the next 4 years? How do we continue to see some of the projects move, and how do we finance those? How do we make sure that it's not on the backs of those who need it the most and who can afford it the least? So we have to think about being creative from that standpoint, and again, making sure that we are incorporating sustainable initiatives in our approach from the private side as well as the public side. Finally, I'll just say I think we have to keep equity as a focus and make sure that those communities that have been looked over, left out, and left behind are included in what we do technologically to improve our communities around the country. Doesn't matter if you're in Queens or Brooklyn, doesn't matter if you're in Inglewood, California, or anywhere in between. How do we make sure that there's an equity lens in these initiatives? Because many of the mayors that I know and I speak with across this country have that as a priority, and that doesn't change because corporate America changes. That doesn't change for us because the politics at the national level change, because we know where the needs are, we know where the issues are, and we know that for too long those areas have not been invested in, and we're going to continue to focus on that. So that's what I think it looks like, and I think that we think about how we bring together the best minds like we have here to move that forward even after we leave today.
Thank you, Mayor. Rory, take us from a C to an A.
Okay. So I think the equity piece is huge, and quick anecdote, a couple of years ago I was working at the G20, very hard to get China, Russia, the US, and everybody else to agree on anything. What they agreed for in infrastructure just a few years ago was sustainable, inclusive, and resilient infrastructure. And I think if we all go back to that, we can all agree that we need to be building sustainable, inclusive, and resilient infrastructure. If I think about, the why, this country is the country of big ambitions, dreaming big, sometimes missing those ambitions, a lot of time missing those ambitions, but never stop trying. And I think that's the energy we need to bring into infrastructure. Infrastructure can be slow, it can be cumbersome, it can go on for one project can go on for a very long period of time. But if we keep bringing that energy and we keep bringing the why to it, there's nothing that can stop us. And the whole world looks to the US for that energy, the dynamism, and the innovation. So let's bring it to them and show them what we can do in the infrastructure space. Lastly, on the technology piece, technology is an enabler. It is going to enable us to do what we need to do better, more efficiently, with better environmental outcomes, but it is not the panacea. So as we're thinking about solutions, let's keep thinking about our people, let's keep thinking about the capacity gap, let's keep thinking about funding and financing, and when and where technology can aid us to achieve those goals.
Round of applause for this amazing panel, y'all.